Hello, I'm Keith Hilson with the Schmidt Music Trombone Shop, back with Alto Trombone 102. So in our last video, I talked some about the history of the alto trombone, where it came from, how it developed, the role it played and continues to play in a number of different genres and settings, and perhaps a little bit of what's coming forward with the alto. But today, I want to talk about how do we actually start playing. So we're going to run under the assumption that you have an alto trombone. You have a mouthpiece and you're ready to go. If you don't have a mouthpiece, if you don't have an instrument, take a look for an upcoming video here, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about some alto trombone options. There are a range of different alto trombone offerings out there, and of course you want to make sure that you have an instrument that is going to play well. Regardless kind of the price range you're looking, there are options out there. You want to make sure you have an instrument that is going to be a good choice. It's going to help support you as you're learning alto trombone. So today I've got our Lake City ATB 415 alto in yellow brass with a box 7C mouthpiece. You've got your instrument. How do we get started on learning alto? First off, with the alto, it has a different sound, different characteristic than tenor. That's what we want to have. If we wanted to have the same overall timbre of a tenor trombone, just smaller, we'd play on a small bore tenor trombone or something even smaller than that. For us, if we're playing alto, in a lot of cases, we want to have that difference in sound. There's a lightness, a different color to the sound that you just can't replicate on tenor. So how do we learn what this should be? Well, of course, we listen. We get in our head what this is going to sound like. So we listen to great alto trombone players, Joe Alessi, Christian Lindberg. One of my personal favorites is Elaine Trudell. We listen to great alto vocalists. We can take obviously a lot from their timbre. There's a real correlation between the alto vocalist and the alto trombone. We can list instruments, for example, viola can have certain sound characteristics as well. So, but in particular, listening to great alto trombones to start getting in our head what this can sound like. Now, how do we replicate that on the instrument? One of the biggest things I find when I play alto trombone is how I have to change my airflow. In a lot of ways, if we try to approach alto with the same type of air that we play on small bore tenor, what we're going to get is a really bright, edgy sound, very, very tight and focused, and really sharp around the edge of the sound, like there, I'm trying to shove a ton of air through the instrument, and to handle that kind of air, I have to focus down my embouchure, which is giving us some of that brightness, almost that nasally character to it. With alto, we have to slow that air down quite a bit. It's still, compared to like large bore tenor, for example, it's maybe not going to be as wide an air column, but it has to have some of that same, especially broadness within reason, and some of that weight and support behind it. We still want to give it support, but it's going to be moving quite a bit slower. And if we do that right, we should get this a little bit more, not necessarily floating quality. We still want the notes to center, but it should be lighter. There should be a little bit more of a distribution, especially kind of in the mid to upper range, without getting bright and sharp. And what I love about that, when you find that airflow, the instrument tends to work with you better. You're not fighting it as much. You're fitting the airflow to the instrument. So how do we start figuring out how we adapt that sound? Well, that sound we have here with that airflow. Well, we're going to start playing. Now, there are, of course, some challenges with alto trombone. One of the big ones being it's in a completely different key. There are a couple different ways we can think about this. So the alto trombone, of course, is in the key of E flat, so everything is moved up a fourth. So instead of our fundamental pitch being a pedal B flat, it is now going to be an E flat below the bass clef staff. And of course, the overtone series now is all built off of E flat. So we're going to have an octave E flat above that, and then a B flat, and then an E flat, and a G, and a B flat, and so on and so forth. And so on and so forth there. So learning how to deal with this transposition, these, these notes, the overtone series being a completely different place, we can take one of two approaches. Either we can treat the instrument as a transposing instrument. So for example, in the saxophone world, they go through whether you're playing a tenor saxophone or an alto saxophone or a soprano, bari, whatever it might be, you're thinking of everything as C. So for example, certain fingering is a C regardless of what instrument you're playing. So if we were going to take that approach, we could, for example, use the positions of a B flat major scale and play an E flat major scale. So we can think of it as a transposing instrument. Now there are a few problems with that. The biggest problem is it's not really considered a transposing instrument, meaning that any music you might play is not going to be transposed for you. It's still going to be written as a C instrument. In other words, even though it's a key in the key of E flat, you're going to, if they want you to play an E flat, they're going to write you an E flat there. So what I tend to prefer when I'm working with folks learning alto is to treat it as a brand new instrument. So we have to relearn all of these positions. Okay, well, how do we do this? Well, there's a couple different things we can do. First off, we have to get comfortable just to where all of these notes are slotting in. Aurally, things are in a different place now. All of a sudden, wait, I'm used to this note in first position being a B flat, now it's an E flat here. Or I'm used to this note in third position being an E flat, now it's an A flat or a D flat. So starting to get our ears and our embouchure used to where everything is sitting differently, we can use different exercises. We can do certain things. For example, some simple lip slurs, just for us to start applying this different air concept and to start to learn where these different partials are locking in. So for example, like so. And what lip slurs like that will do, or you can do things like Remington long tones. So for example, we can do this. We can start on our E flat. In this case, the E flat, this would be the second ledger line above the bass clef staff. Or if we're thinking alto clef, this would be the fourth line E flat. Long tone exercises like that too. These really simple warm-up routine kind of exercises are going to help us to start applying this air concept that we want to have to the instrument and help us to start learning where these different partials are locked in, and thirdly, help us to start figuring out where the positions are. Alto trombone is obviously quite a bit shorter than tenor, and so what happens is all of the positions become squashed together. All of the distances, the intervals become shorter. This is one of the big reasons why we hear, if we think of alto, we think of intonation challenges. It's because compared to what we're used to on tenor, everything is in a different place. It's very much the body having to relearn, okay, this is where second position is now. This is where third position is. This is where fourth position is. And we also see that typically the higher pitched the instrument, the more a lot of the intonation tendencies are magnified. Now, we'll talk about that in a later video as we get into a little more advanced concept of what happens to the intonation on alto. But just knowing right off the bat that any intonation problems we have on tenor are only going to be magnified on alto. So using long tones, using simple lip slurs like that to start hearing where those notes are locking in, where those positions are, can be really, really helpful. And then the other thing I love using right away are scales. Now, when we're learning alto, it can be exceptionally helpful to be already familiar with alto clef in particular. Now, it depends on what you're going to be using it for. If you are learning alto for the sake of, maybe I want to use it in like a jazz setting, or I want to go through and I just want to create my own music, or I want to play music that I've been playing on tenor and just play it on alto instead, then you know, you don't maybe necessarily have to know alto. But if you're going to be thinking about using alto in any type of, you know, chamber ensemble settings or classical solo settings, anything where you're going to be reading music written for the alto trombone in mind, more often than not, you're going to deal with this in alto clef. Now, certainly knowing tenor clef and bass clef are going to be very helpful as well. I've played alto trombone parts in alto clef, tenor clef, bass clef, treble clef, transposing, you know, French horn parts, and on and on and on. So having access to all of these different clefs, being able to transpose them, to read them, are going to be very, very helpful. But if we're treating this as I want to learn alto to use it in classical settings, going through and being comfortable with alto clef, doing scale work can be really, really helpful. What I did to really familiarize myself with not only alto clef to make sure I remembered how it worked, and to familiarize myself with the positions of the instrument, is I wrote out all 12 major scales for the alto trombone. Wrote them all out by hand, wrote in all the positions just to start reminding myself, this is where this note is now. Okay, I'm used to B natural, you know, right above the bass clef staff being in 4th position. Well, guess what? On alto trombone, it's in 5th position, and so on and so forth. Really giving myself those visual reminders of that. If you need a position chart for alto, need some help with that, there are tons of resources out on Google, for example. There's a lot of different, you know, position charts out there to go through and do that. But doing something as simple as, again, writing out those scales and then going through and slowly practicing them and thinking about that intonation in that sound all the way through. So for example, playing an F major scale, this is going to be a little different because we're going to be starting on our F. This would be a 4th line bass clef on bass clef. This is going to be the bottom of the alto clef, for example, F. Going through and so forth. G major. And spend your time slowly going through those scales, so not only are you getting comfortable with the sound, the airflow, the response, where everything is locking in there, but you're visually starting to apply where all of these notes are locking in. Okay, this is where a G is, this is where a B is, this is where a D is, etc., etc. I think all of those are really helpful. Now, of course, there are a whole number of alto trombone methods available as well. In our upcoming video, we'll talk about some of those methods, a little bit, some options that are out there, and they can be really, really great resources. But even if you don't have access to them, we can start working on some of these concepts as well. And what's really great, what a lot of players end up finding with alto, is after a certain period of time, once you get comfortable with where everything sits, where everything is on the instrument. Okay, I know where all of my notes lie on the instrument now, whether we've just relearned where they're at, or if we're mentally transposing. Oh wait, this was an A flat, and now it's transposed up, and now it's a D flat. Whatever method we're using with that, once we get comfortable with it, we're able to really apply everything we're doing on tenor as far as music goes and apply it to alto. And frankly, a lot of alto trombone players, again, will read parts in whatever clef that you're dealing with. So I hope this is helpful as a real basic introduction. Take a watch for our upcoming video here, where we're going to talk about a little bit more specifics, some more details, how to think about articulation on the alto trombone, how to think about the upper register, what to think about intonation, and some, you know, different alto trombone methods, and how do we keep evolving on the instrument. Take a look for that video upcoming here. As always, you can reach out to us if you have any questions, comments. Feel free to leave them here. Shoot us an email at tromboneshop@schmidtmusic.com. So happy practicing, and please keep making music.